Lately, it seems every passing second brings news of another climate-driven disaster. But we still have the power to turn back the clock. Harnessing the power of collective human energy, today's university students are working together to chart a new future, demanding and creating the solutions for a sustainable climate. Our focus in science, engineering, activism, and politics offers the potential of a better tomorrow for all of us. Tune in to Campus Climate Corps for news of what is and what is not happening at this year's UN Climate Conference. Prepare for a livable tomorrow with a life and career of action. Join us and become part of the solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you today to Campus Climate Corps Day 1 of the live student briefing. Yesterday, we had a wonderful conference, I think. Absolutely fantastic participation from our audiences from multiple universities, University of Florida, especially for the host and all the other universities. So thank you so much for everyone who participated yesterday. Really glad that each and every one of you were able to participate. But today, we have something special. Today, we're going to focus on the youth action and the youth climate summit called the Conference of Youth, happening over in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt, live. I have a couple of our folks who actually were in Sharm El Sheikh live attending this event at the Conference of Youth. So we're going to invite a couple of them to speak, and we have some different content and some videos and some photos we're going to share. But firstly, I'm going to ask Esteban and Valholly to give maybe 2 to 3 minutes, 5 minutes, however long you want. Tell us about what's going on in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt. What are the youth saying? What are the youth doing? I know we got like a very small excerpt yesterday from Valholly and Esteban, but I want you to go more in depth today, especially to maybe some of our university folks who might be feeling a little bit more pessimistic and nihilistic. I know I personally saw on Instagram and YouTube the youth delivering their collective youth action statement to the COP leaders yesterday. But I'm curious, based on your participation in COY, what do you think is the actual content that youth are looking for right now? What are the youth saying? What are the youth doing? And do you have any faith right now that the COP is going to be listening to what was transpiring over at the Conference of Youth at all? So maybe Valholly, would you like to go first and give us, your best analysis here? What do you think? Like, give us an honest to God analysis. What did you think was going on at COY, and maybe some of your thoughts?
Rock, can you hear me well?
Oh, I can hear you perfectly fine. Welcome.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. If you were here yesterday. So overall, I actually didn't get to attend COY for one of the days, sadly. But when I was especially the ones who were organizing it, there were quite a few of the nihilistic sort in the crowd waiting for things to happen. But overall, I think the youth are really still trying to demand change. But whether or not that's happening effectively or not is debatable. Based on what I saw and the presentations I went to, again, there were a lot of discussions of adaptation rather than mitigation, and a lot of very surface level discussions about why what's happening is bad, but nothing that productive. And even the workshops that I saw, it wasn't really about like building these policymakers and helping youth be a part of this in a way that is significant. It was just sort of using the place that we already have as a constituency at COP. So I hope there will be significant change, and I hope the organization in the coming years will be better. But again, nothing really to write home about.
So let me ask, do
In
you think that maybe the youth's statement or the youth, participation in the event, which you seem to be saying is hopeful, and they have some sort of, bright outreach on it, is that naivete in your opinion? Do you think that maybe the youth are looking at this from too hopeful of a standpoint? And maybe your honest thoughts, like, are we really thinking about this in too hopeful of a light? Or is this the correct approach?
I don't think there's a correct approach I can say, but definitely, in my opinion, it does seem pretty naive. But I'm still not really sure if that's because I'm majorly pessimistic from being in this world for so long, or if from being in this world for so long, my pessimism is for a reason. But I would figure that these youth would have the same ideas that I do. So the hope that I see, it reminds me of being a younger activist at the small marches and thinking that like a protest of 100 or a few hundred people was going to enact some giant change or some revolution would start because of it. But yeah, the hope is always a little tiring in my mind.
Fair enough. One question we have in the chat is do you feel that the suppression is evident in Egypt at this very moment? Is the atmosphere, can you tell from the atmosphere that maybe that there is a little bit of pressure, either from the Egyptian government, from COP, or from local security armed forces? What do you think? And then follow-up question to that one is, what are the youth in Egypt saying about all of this?
I think the overall atmosphere in Egypt is kind of tense, honestly, especially with all of the security around. And if I'm being honest, the security is better than the conferences I've attended before, at least for COP itself. But from what I hear from the youth, which I haven't heard much, and I hope to hear more, of course, within the next few weeks, again, there's just that like spark that's still there. And I really hope there can be the change that people are wishing for. But I haven't seen it in past years, and I think it would be a bit much to say that it's all going to happen this year, especially with such a tense environment that we're in. But hopefully everything gets a little bit more professional and they're able to be productive and eye-opening conversations this year.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to come back to you in just a few moments because I do have some follow-up questions about the actual, COY conference and how the Egyptian youth are participating. But Esteban, let's move into you real quick. Tell me a little bit yourself about maybe your thoughts and analysis. So especially maybe for, I don't know, somebody, give me like your own personal thoughts and feelings on how COY is proceeding from maybe a more, from a graduate student perspective. You and I are we've been at the University of Florida for a few years. We've seen climate marches in Gainesville. They're not the stuff of legends. We've seen, pictures from Madrid and Glasgow. And we've seen some actual climate marches in our time, focusing on, hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of people. And then we come back to Gainesville and we can't even get 100 people out. But taking those comparisons to COY in Egypt, what are your personal thoughts? In the actual focal point and center of where the UN climate conference is being held this year, do you feel that the youth in Egypt are actually taking to the streets right now? Do you feel that Sharm El Sheikh is the center point of where youth action is happening right now?
First and foremost, are you saying we're getting old? This is like to say that.
With each passing year, my back seems to be sending me a new message.
This is also say that we're getting old, but concerning COY, no, it's a resounding no. I haven't seen anything like, not even close, not even as I've been trying to trace some discontent, some protests, and I have been not available. It hasn't been possible for me to see any of that. Of course, making sure that it's a negative, looking for a negative, it's very difficult. You have to clear everything in town, but essentially no. And what from someone that comes as a grad student to COY for the first time, essentially as an observer, not as a participant, the first thing that struck me was the festive environment. And given the last IPCC report, given if you look at this at COY and COP as a trend, thus far, we haven't, as a youth, we haven't been able to exert that much pressure. We haven't been very successful in exerting that much pressure into COP, not as much as we would have liked. Of course, it's very difficult to evaluate what would have happened if no COY would have existed, no marches would have existed. Probably the situation would be worse, but clearly, in terms of comparing what's actually happening in climate action with our objectives, we are falling behind. So in that context, and added the urgency of the message of the last IPCC report, what I've seen in more sober environment, and at the same time, I would have expected a more not disruptive, but a more critic environment of what COP is doing, and I didn't see any of that. Not in the opening ceremonies, not that much in content within the several talks that were there. And that gave me a sense of urgency, in the sense that, yeah, COY it wasn't doing what I would have expected them to do this year. At the same time, there was presence of the Egyptian government, and there was presence from the White House, which from the perspective of the people that come to COP, it was essentially a positive exchange, a too positive exchange. Essentially, the adults telling everyone at COY that they were doing great and they were doing what should be done, and COY essentially not posing any kind of criticism of the inaction we see at COP. So in that sense, it seems like a feedback loop. At the same time, the presence of security is everywhere right now. It's something that you see in Egypt, but definitely it has increased considerably as COP approaches. It starts tomorrow. The other point, and we mentioned this yesterday, where we are at right now, which is the pavilions area, the activities within the pavilions. And let me show you one thing for the audience to at least, there will be enough opportunity for the audience to actually see this in the future. But what you see here are the pavilions, and what you can, they're right now empty, but what the activity that would happen here in the first 2 days has been canceled all of a sudden, and we were told about this just 2 days ago. And I can, if it was a problem for us, I can only imagine the problem that was for the people actually taking care of these pavilions. The pavilions are can correspond to a country, a group of countries, NGOs, interest groups. It's a wide variety. It's a huge amount of pavilions, but they were just pushed 2 days all of a sudden, and now their activity will start on November 8th after the big shots have come and go, essentially. So overall, there is a lot of security. Where Sharm El Sheikh, it's a small town surrounded by desert. This is not Cairo. the potential to actually have people coming and protest is far smaller. The security control is much larger, and at the same time, we've had this movement of activities all of a sudden, which definitely does not invite any kind of protest.
Okay, that's a really good analysis. Thank you very much. Based on that, I do have about 6 questions from the chat so far. We got a few lined up. I am going to answer them in order of how fast they came into my inbox. Don't worry, we have live Campus Climate Corps volunteers monitoring all of our chats. So if you've asked a question, be assured we will get to it in the order they were received. We also have some other content we'd like to present to you today as well. But this is something for both of you, actually. The first question I got to me from Liza from the UCF campus. Liza, thank you so much for the question. The question is, what is diversity like in Sharm El Sheikh right now? How did you feel it was in COY? How did you feel it is in Sharm El Sheikh? Are there a good, gender diversity? Is there also, diversity in, COY, specifically? And what do you think? What do you think about that?
Valholly, do you want to go first or shall I?
Yeah, of course, I'll go. Well, personally, of course, I'm a little biased. I'm Native, so I was definitely looking out for Indigenous people. And I only saw one Indigenous person at COY. And usually I look for these people because they're usually wearing traditional clothing. And this specific person had beadwork on. There was a surprisingly low amount of queer presence for what I expected, especially for young people. No matter who's organizing, how professional you are as a youth, there are always so many queer people. And that was overwhelmingly present with, as I talked about yesterday, the binary language that was heavily used over the course of the event. But the diversity itself, there were so many different people there, and a lot to learn from everybody. And there were honestly more people from the Global South than I would have anticipated, especially because of the financial limitations of Global South peoples coming to COY and COP. But yeah, a very diverse group. And well, it wasn't entirely what I expected. At least it wasn't all white Americans flooding in to talk about American issues. There was actual discussion from all around the world.
Wonderful. Esteban?
Yes, I agree with Valholly, especially in the point of queerness. What we've seen, and we see it through the Gender Day here, essentially the Gender Day is centered in women, but there is no mention whatsoever of queer activity, queer activists, right? Queer politicians. The same thing occurred at COY, and essentially, again, it's difficult to find the negative. But thus far, as far as we've seen, we couldn't find any talk about queer activists, queer action in climate change, and yeah, that's definitely evident. On the other hand, yes, there is a variety of people of different nationalities coming into COY, coming into COP. Definitely in that sense, yes. But overall, I agree with Valholly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for both our answering that question. Next, I'd like to introduce Michael Fidler. Michael is one of our members whom you heard yesterday. He's been a member of Campus Climate Corps and Intelligentsia for a number of years now and is our professional photographer, among other things, because that's the reason why you saw some wonderful photos from yesterday and today as well. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We do have some photos I'm going to showcase in our PowerPoint presentation, but I'd rather have Michael be here to showcase them too. If you've ever tuned into any of our broadcasts in the past, especially from Glasgow, Madrid, even going as far back as Paris, Michael has been the one taking all of those very professional photographs, very professional shots. and is the reason why we have such great material to showcase. Michael, you're muted right now, by the way.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
I apologize for the technical delay. I'm using Esteban computer. It's all in Spanish. So if I might say, it's all Spanish to me. So now I'll try to compartir pantalla. Hopefully that will be sharing the screen. And here it should, the images should show up. Are they showing up?
Not yet. At least I don't have them yet on our screen.
Well, I once again apologize. I will have Esteban to do the Spanish thing for me.
We need him to allow us to
you would need to allow us to share.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So my Spanish is actually pretty good then.
Yeah.
Okay. So while I am ensuring that you can share your screen, tell us a bit more about about getting these photos. Like how was the atmosphere, taking photos? Did anyone approach you like in Glasgow last time?
Well, when it comes to police, they are keeping me alone. I haven't had any discussions with police so far, so I haven't been arrested yet. When it comes to the students, yes, I got some attention. Actually, that was one of the first points I wanted to show in my photos, if we get them going, because I have a fairly professional camera. And when the students saw me taking some photos, they asked me if I was a professional photographer. Well, I helped it a bit, yes. And then the green one. So you will see in photos, if we get them working, that yes, I was pretty, many people asked me to take photos of them. So can you see the screen now? Can you see our screen now? So actually, I'm moving on right away. This is just the general view of how Sharm is located, or where the COY event took place. It's really, as Esteban said, sea with beaches on one side and desert with mountains on the other side. And this would be the area where COY took place. So the first thing I saw was a swimming pool, and I thought, well, it's pretty appropriate since Sharm is such a touristy city. But nobody was in the swimming pool, so I assumed people really came for the conference. So the first ordeal was trying to get in because we submitted our application for COY several days, maybe even weeks in advance, and we never really got any answer back. So we didn't know whether we were getting in or not. So Esteban was very patient and waiting in the queue to get his badge. I didn't have the patience, so I just simply jumped the queue, went straight in, pretended I'm a professional photographer with no badge, and for the whole day, nobody really asked me. So the camera did the trick. And coming back to your original question, if people approach me, yes. This seemed to be one of the highlights there. As soon as the students got to this sign of COY17, welcome to the conference, it seemed like everybody wanted to have his or her photo taken. So these two girls asked me to take a photo with their iPhone. As soon as I did, and this girl came and wanted me to take photo with her iPhone and with my camera. And then there was another 10, maybe 15 students who basically asked me to do the same. It seemed like they were just putting it on Facebook or Instagram immediately. So it seemed like that was the main purpose of them coming there. So to make my point, here is another example of just photo shooting. And I think this is the last photo showing another student. They just stopped me, then saw my camera and say, "Are you photographer?" "Yes, please take our photos." So I did, and I'm paying my debt here, showing the photos right here. It's not on the COY website, it's not on the COP website, but it's on the CCC stream. Another highlight seemed to be these electrical scooters. There were, I would say, dozens of them, and some of the students were using them, also the police officers and security guys. And I had the feeling that some of the students seen the electrical scooter for the first time. So they were really trying to ride them. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work that well, because it took maybe a few minutes and I just saw this guy who just fell down, broke his knee. So at least the ambulance that was everywhere there had something to do. So that was a lesson learned. Do not write it too fast. Usually at COY, there are these informational booths, so where people are discussing and talking about what their organizations do. From what I saw, half of the booths were completely empty. There was nobody there. And for the other ones, I didn't have the patience to stop there and discuss something. What caught my interest was this Canadian or University of Canada booth, because they brought a large TV and they were doing the virtual poster session, similar to what we did in Bonn 2017. The difference was that it was under the direct sun. It was about 30 degrees, no shade, so you could hardly see anything on TV. So I felt kind of sorry for these students that they were standing there for the whole day in the heat and hardly anyone stopped there. So then I decided it's time to go to a session. So there were plenty of students trying to get into one of the rooms. So I just went into flow, had no idea what was the presentation about. So went in and waited what was going to happen. Then this girl in a red shirt showed up and introduced a lesson or a session or workshop, which should be about NDCs. The first question is, what do you know about NDCs? Let's vote. And you would expect that people just raise hands and say, yes, I know a lot or I know nothing. But to be really IT cool, people had to submit their vote on a cell phone. But hardly anyone had a signal there. So they decided to share the public Wi-Fi there. The password was horrible. So here is the girl announcing the password. And this photo I took 6 minutes later. I looked up in the timing. So this guy is still trying to answer the very first question after 6 minutes, not being able to get on the Wi-Fi. And he was lucky he got in. Also, the password was actually written on the TV, but the downside was that the room was about 30, maybe 35 meters long, so you could not see anything at all on the TV. So I spent there maybe 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, we learned that some of the people know something about NDCs, some of the people know nothing about NDCs, so I thought I don't have patience for that and left the room again. So I went to the area, the workshops area, which Esteban recommended me. It was taken place in squash courts, and there were some of these workshops going on. So I picked court 4 and went in, not knowing what to expect. So here I'm just opening the doors and wondering what is going to happen there. Then I attended one of the workshops. Let me just hopefully remove this this away. Yeah, hopefully it's away now. So there's a workshop. I did not really pay attention that much because the acoustic was horrible. The courts were open, no roof, so you could hardly hear anything at all. So I was just guessing that the workshop was about peace and climate change, about the relationship between these two topics. What was kind of sad that some of the students really wanted to discuss, and the acoustic was just horrible. So this girl here on this image was saying something, but I just could not hear her at all. And I was, what, 6-7 meters away from her. So again, it seemed kind of like a wasted time. So I think what was probably the most useful part of all these workshops is when the workshops ended and people were standing in front of them and discussing in person what they experienced. Obviously, then the people from the next workshop, which took place in the squash field, came out and say, "Oh, please be quiet or go and discuss it somewhere else." So I believe the most useful part for Esteban here or Valholly was simply meeting some of the people and discussing the stuff there in person. Finally, moving to the main hall where COY took place, that would be the sport field. I would guess some maybe basketball field. This is the general arrangement of the room. So plenty of empty space, and then these nice tables, not really very comfortable to sit at because the people have to turn away all the time. So some of them were just on their phone doing their Instagram and stuff, and listening to these gentlemen who were doing their presentation. It was partly in person, it was partly virtual. so over the internet, and the connection wasn't really great. So some of the talks were cut off. So that was a bit disappointing as well. But here I took a shot of Esteban. He was paying a lot of attention all the time. So I hope he learned some stuff there. So to really wrap up last photo, this is what I think was the most useful part of COY. Simply students meeting together and discussing stuff, but not really during the workshops, but mostly after the workshops and presentations. So to wrap up, final photo, it was organized. I wouldn't say it was organized well, and content-wise, it was kind of empty. So this is just the empty photo of the welcome to COY sign. And with saying that, I think that should be all from me.
Wonderful.
So turning it back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate your insight there. A couple of questions about COY though is what language was COY COY discussed in? Valholly, do you want to answer? A couple questions. Firstly, was it in English, French, and if it was in Arabic, did they have some sort of translation signs there for the language barrier?
Yeah, that was definitely something that was weird for me to see. It was basically entirely in English, except for, I believe, one speaker in the opening statements who spoke no English and had a translator that couldn't project. So I'm sure if you could understand it in his language, you were good. But I think Esteban and I really struggled to hear what the translator was saying. And along with that, there were no subtitles anywhere. There were no sign language interpreters. It was basically entirely in English, which seemed a little ridiculous, but I guess it worked for most, hopefully.
Fantastic. At least I'm glad that it was at least understandable to look, between the fact that it was in English, and it doesn't seem like too many people then had issues with the language barriers there. Okay, any other thoughts regarding COY? I know Michael talked a little bit about, seemed a little bit of disorganization there, especially with regard to the Wi-Fi and other problems that seem to pop up there. But any other thoughts on COY from either of you? And then we have an interview that we'll go to, and then some final questions, and then we'll wrap up today.
Yes, essentially we had sessions canceled all of a sudden, and the problem is that sparked an issue at the same time. Concurrently with cancellations, we had changes in rooms, and that was not reflected in the agenda, so that sparked a series of issues with everyone's day. You had people entering one room and the talk would start, but it happened that it wasn't what they were expecting because it wasn't what was programmed. That was something to consider. The other issue that Valholly mentioned yesterday, the acoustics of the main stadium were pretty bad. Either there was just a lot of noise going on, and at the same time, the other problem was that most workshops were conducted in squash courts. Squash courts, as I don't know for who may know them, but they are just very noisy. And it happened that they were connected with a waiting room, very big waiting room on the other side. So that difficulted hearing even the people that were right by one.
Interesting. So the acoustics seem to have some issues there too. How far away is the COY venue from the COP venue?
Very far away.
Really?
Yeah, nothing to do. So the COY venue is essentially an Olympic city designed for youth, and then probably currently used as a training facility, but it's essentially on the it's on the northwest edge of on the southwest edge of town, I would say. Actually, Yeah, more to the northwest edge of town, and COP actually, it's various kilometers away, more than 10 kilometers away, on the other side of the town, which is yeah, essentially the eastern side, east of town, directly east. So yes, again, they are just very different spaces. Security has ramped up here. It's a very different atmosphere from the one that you experience at COY.
Absolutely, absolutely. Valholly, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, just to reiterate the acoustics, like there were quite a few presentations that I went to where I was maybe just a few feet from the speaker and I was maybe making out half of what they said. And like what Michael was saying about how the most important part of this or beneficial part was when people talk to each other after, that was painfully apparent, especially when there were panel discussions that were seemingly very interesting, and I think could have led to a very big conversation. And the comments were significantly more thought-provoking and said more than the entire 30-minute or hour-long presentation did. And it was just disappointing to see that. So I guess if there's one beacon of hope from all of it, it's that the actual participants were looking for the same things that Esteban and I were looking for. It's just that COY itself didn't deliver. So hopefully we can expect more from COP, but not trying to get our hopes up anytime soon.
And it was just as Michael said, most of the most interesting things happened essentially when just attendees mixed up after any workshop, right? It wasn't that much workshops or talks. Of course, we have a series of talks that were interesting, and then we just interviewed the people involved. But the highlight was essentially the conversations that happened outside of the talks.
Absolutely. That's really good to know, actually. From my personal experience, it always was that the most interesting things that come out of some of these conferences are simply the people that you meet afterwards, not the presentations themselves, but the people that you meet at these conferences can really be inspiring, can really, share some of the connections that you yourself, think you're a part of, and so on. Anyway, Esteban, before I play this interview with Doreen, you want to give some explanation, some background about who Doreen is? Why did you get an interview with her? Maybe any kind of background you can provide at all on Doreen.
Actually, this is one of those cases. It's not that Doreen had a talk. It's just that I met Doreen while waiting for a talk, in between talks, and she's a law student from Uganda, and she is currently leading working on a project to essentially plant trees to solve two issues, to do some carbon sequestration, but also to address food security in a region of Uganda. She's also, as you'll see, involved with the East African Union, and she's pushing for climate change to be to be seriously considered within that framework. And besides that, as a law student, we'll see that she has quite some volunteer work that it's interesting for the larger context of her country.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that background. For those of you watching, you should now be seeing my PowerPoint presentation screen. We're going to play this interview that CCC volunteer Esteban got with Doreen. So thank you everyone for watching. We're going to go ahead and play this.
We are here today with Doreen Naiga, a law student at Uganda Christian University. Hi Doreen, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you have told us you're a climate activist, and we wanted to know what your main project is in Uganda.
My main project is Omuti Initiative. Omuti is a Luganda word which means a tree, Omuti. So we wanted to come up with a name that's able to integrate everyone in society. Omuti Initiative is known for profit organization, which is in partnership with the National Forestry Authority, Uganda Teachers Association, and various stakeholders. Our mission is to have a green environment in all secondary, tertiary, and primary schools in Uganda, Africa, and the entire continent by 2030. Under the Omuti initiative, our vision is to have 1 million export high quality fruit trees planted in all secondary schools in Uganda. Uganda is going to be our first phase, but we are looking into moving to Africa and then to the global community. Why we started the Omuti initiative is we realized there is a leadership gap in community where young people have to take up leadership positions to be able to advocate for societal causes. Under the Omuti initiative, we are focusing on schools because we do realize the potential young children have in bringing societal issues, and this is the time we have to groom them up into the climate spaces. Under the Omuti initiative, we are looking at planting over 35 fruit trees in secondary, tertiary, and secondary schools in Africa, in Uganda, and then across the world. And in this, we are looking at a produce of over 5,000 trees, fruits every season. And in this, we shall be advocating for a healthy, nutritious, and a greener environment in society. We are currently in the phase of fundraising, and we are calling on to different partners to come and join us as we in the realization of the world we want, because the future of the children in across the world is now, it's not tomorrow. This is the time for us to take action to ensure there is a change in the climate across the world.
Indeed, it is. And at a larger scale, you have been involved with the East Africa community integration process, and you're trying to advocate for climate change policies within that framework, right?
Yes, I haven't been a stakeholder in the integration process. Yes, I am a stakeholder in the integration process because I'm a youth. And under the we have the East Africa community already on. However, we haven't established the East Africa community youth wing. So as youth in Uganda, we have and across East Africa, we have decided to form an East Africa Youth Lane. And under this, I am championing climate action under the lane. My reason could be why am I advocating for climate change under this. During the integration process, we are going to see borders in East Africa being removed, and this is going to enhance agriculture, which is the backbone of society. So what question arises for we, the young people, in regards to climate change? In agriculture, this is a time when industrialization is going to go at its peak. Minerals are going to be discovered, and so much economical growth. However, what questions do we have for the trees, for the climate, and for the future? Under this, with the integration process, and also under the youth, we ourselves, it is time for us to acknowledge that this is a big population, borders being removed. We know what next for the trees, because if borders going to be removed, means trade is going to be eased, and that means trees are going to be cut down or ferried to another country. And this is a time for us to identify ourselves in these spaces. And I do believe under the East Africa Community Youth League, we shall be able to make a difference, not only for ourselves, but also making decisions our future selves will be proud of.
Brilliant. And as if this wasn't enough, you're also a law student, and you're active as well in advocating for plea bargaining, right?
Yes, please.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Under my law school, it's the most interesting part. I love the engagement, community engagement, and the plea bargaining apart from the activism. So we have an elective called clinical legal education, and in this, one of our topics is plea bargaining, where we first learn about it in class, and then we go in the field, go to prisons. In February, I went to Mbarara main prison, which is one of the biggest central prisons in Western Uganda, where we spent a week with the judiciary of Uganda, students from Pepperdine University, and other stakeholders. And in this, we were able to reach out to over 1,000 inmates who have been on remand, some for 7 years, some for a few months, according to the degree of their crime. And under plea bargaining, we go and provide free services for them to be represented. And it's the best platform for us to understand that there is more to life, there is more of a difference we can make as law students. I've been part in various plea bargaining sessions, representing clients who have been on remand, ensuring there is justice, because I do believe not everyone who is in actually committed a crime, or maybe some of them do not have access to justice. They cannot afford a lawyer. But in our ambition to find a purpose in life, I do believe we can make a difference. And one of the difference we can make as lawyers, providing access to justice for those who are vulnerable or who cannot access, who cannot afford it.
Doreen, Naiga, thank you so much for coming. We continue with the coverage of COY17 from Sharm El Sheikh.
Well, Esteban, I'd say that was a fantastic interview. Really well done. Do you have any thoughts post-interview? I noticed there was a couple of topics that were brought up, but I'd like to hear from your own words. Is there anything that you would have liked to ask her? She seems like she's very involved in many of the region's challenges, especially around climate. What are your thoughts now post-interview on that discussion?
Thank you. And again, this is essentially the richness of COY. Perhaps one would desire that the talks were provided this kind of content, but again, you'll find it in the people you meet, and again, by doing so, you get imbued into the problems that other countries are facing, especially in the global south. It's very interesting that she's looking at an integration process and the environmental problems that can derive from an integration process at the same time that she's suggesting solutions, trying to get ahead. Not to limit the integration process in East Africa, but to make it better. And that's not every day you can see essentially an integration process happening before your eyes. So that was one of the most interesting highlights. The other highlight has to do with what Campus Climate Core essentially looks to transmit. You can be in any profession, you can be in any field. This is a law student, and yet she is involved with climate activism, not from one side of things, but from two. From her initiative to plant trees and to do so in primary and secondary schools, at the same time that she's involved with the East African Union. And again, these kind of activities probably require some degree of knowledge on different fields, and that's something you can do while you're at school. That's something you can while you're at school, you can and also beyond, you can target your career towards climate change. It's interdisciplinary. It requires you to take a look at different disciplines and at least be able to exchange content with professionals of different fields, but that's something possible.
Fantastic. Okay. I do have a couple more questions, and we'll move on to final thoughts and conclusions. First question is, does Russia have, or do you feel Russia has any kind of play right now in Egypt? Do they have any presence so far? Have you seen many Russians there, especially given how Egypt's reliance on Russians to help build their energy facilities? Is there anything that you can speak to on that front?
Valholly, do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, the most Russian presence I see is in the actual city, and how there are certain like translations on buildings where words will be written in Russian. Um, Other than that, not even at COP do I see any place for Russia. And in general, I haven't seen or met any Russians here. Um, so definitely not a very big presence if there's any at all.
Yes, again, I concur with Valholly. Definitely, this is a tourism hub. It seems, at least for Russian speakers. You see translations everywhere. You hear it in the streets. It's certainly a place where with which they could be familiar, but at the same time, and the conference COP has not started. Not yet. What we are in the facility, but officially it hasn't started. The pavilions I showed before are currently empty. We're still to explore the whole area. Thus far, I couldn't find the pavilion of the Russian Federation. We'll have to definitely pay attention to what content do they offer in their pavilion, and what activities they are diplomats are up to these days. And as far as we can access that, especially it would be interesting to see how the dynamics that are relatively tense, and we've seen that in the UN at large, concerning the conflict in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the response from other countries. We'll have to see how that plays in the context of COP. Could be that definitely the subject is overlooked. Could be that the same tensions happen to be exacerbated in this context, or it could be that given that the subject is just different, that both sides use it as a means to lower down the tension and perhaps come to some kind of agreement, at least in this field. Certainly, probably for Russia, the most convenient situation would be just to just for the conflict not to surface in the context of COP27, but we actually don't know what will happen.
Absolutely. A couple of our viewers don't have questions, but they have requests. Danielle from the University of Florida and let's see, Kyle from the University of Florida both have this question. Can you investigate what the youth currently feel about the oppression, if there is any at all, of the Egyptian government on youth or on protests right now? So any kind of coverage on what are other people feeling, any kind of interviews or questions or delegates, anything at all you can get on what is the current position or thoughts or feelings of anybody in Egypt right now, especially those who are, in higher positions or whatnot. Can you get kind of information like that and respond, over the next few days? Tell, folks in the University of Florida and, around the other university students around the state, what's going on over there with regard to youth, with regard to protests, and with regard to your own personal thoughts on safety. Okay.
That would be very interesting. And thus far, all the Egyptians I talked to come from a background that is rather official. They are close to their own universities, or also they may have affiliation with the Ministry of Youth and Sports. I'll try my best. It's also very possible that that's the information comes through, but it will have to be perhaps off the record, and essentially me telling you what they told me, but most likely it could be that they won't want to go on an interview in this context. But
absolutely,
definitely very interesting, and I'll be looking into that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Esteban and Valholly. Really appreciate you both tuning in today to the Campus Climate Corps live stream. We will be having them back tomorrow for day 2 of Campus Climate Corps' daily briefing. And for all of you students watching today, be sure also to join us tomorrow, because we're going to be here to answer your questions, your thoughts and concerns. And make sure that you bring those questions to us mid-session, after the session, the middle of the session. We don't care. That's our job, and that's what we're here to do. So everybody, we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. See ya.
Lately, it seems every passing second brings news of another climate-driven disaster. But we still have the power to turn back the clock. Harnessing the power of collective human energy, today's university students are working together to chart a new future, demanding and creating the solutions for a sustainable climate. Our focus in science, engineering, activism, and politics offers the potential of a better tomorrow for all of us. Tune in to Campus Climate Corps for news of what is and what is not happening at this year's UN Climate Conference. Prepare for a livable tomorrow with a life and career of action. Join us and become part of the solution.